Star Wars 7x7, episode 2517. All right, we are 1/4 of the way through season 1 of The Bad Batch, and so I figure, hey, let's stop and take a look at some of the overall things that we are learning about this series and big questions about where they are going to be taking things in the final 3/4 of this season, and so on and so forth. Let's dive into it. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. So, in this first quarter of The Bad Batch, we have 4 episodes. There are going to be 16 episodes in this season. Some of the lessons that we are learning so far have to do with just the way that they are deciding to approach the series overall. In particular, I was wondering whether they were going to do more of the 4-episode type story arc things like they did in the Clone Wars, and in particular the last iteration of the Clone Wars we saw, season 7, 12 episodes, each of them, what am I saying? The episodes were all part of 4-episode story arcs, right? So that's not what they are doing with The Bad Batch, at least not so far. Instead, it is more episode of the week kind of situational stuff. Even with Star Wars Rebels, toward the end of Rebels, they were mostly like one-off episodes, but there were a couple of, pairing episodes, right? So Wolves in a Door and A World Between Worlds, right? So there were sort of 2-episode story arcs in that regard. And then Star Wars Resistance, also, very much a, single episode situation for the most part, but occasional 2-episode story arcs happening as well. And it seems like that's the way that we are going with The Bad Batch so far, that it's either going to be one-offs or, maybe we'll get to some 2-episode story arcs, but they're really not setting us up for that sort of thing. And the second big lesson that we're learning about this is that it's not going to be just about The Bad Batch. It's actually going to be about the global picture of the galaxy as well. So we've already had some information about the macroeconomics of the transition from the Republic to the Empire, with the invalidation of local currency and getting people to turn their stuff in for Imperial credits, for example, and the issuing of chain codes to every citizen. So all of these literal empire building things are being addressed, and I'm sure there's going to be more of that as well. In addition, there's the transition from clones to conscripted soldiers and how that's going to happen too. Another thing we're learning about it is the need for conflict and how to set up conflict that is going to be, satisfactory and evolving in terms of what happens over the course of the series. And so when you look at the Empire beginning, nobody's really fighting this except for Saw Gerrera so far. And Saw, even though he only appeared in 1 episode, has been referenced in 2 episodes, right? With Crosshair taking that elite squad to try and track down Saw. So I imagine that this is probably not the last we've seen of Saw Gerrera in the series, because somebody has to be fighting against the Empire at this point. The Bad Batch doesn't seem necessarily inclined to fight them. They're just trying to get away from them. And I think the only thing that they're going to consider about from a fighting perspective is trying to get Crosshair back, right? Trying to rescue him and deprogram him somehow. And then, of course, fighting to keep Omega safe, which is kind of unfortunately turning out to be a regular thing, basically. There was a thing way back when in Batman comics where Batman is reminiscing about the Joker and Robin, and said, yeah, he used to call Robin the boy hostage, not the boy wonder. And Omega's kind of going down this path right now. She is always in jeopardy, and sometimes of her own making, sometimes not, sometimes specifically directed at her, and sometimes just because she's involved in what's going on. But yeah, we're gonna have to get past this before this gets to be a bit old, if you will. I mean, we can certainly rely on the notion of parenting and taking care of kids as a growth opportunity for the Bad Batch, but it shouldn't always be that they're having to rescue her from some other danger yet again. Which of course means that whatever they've been hinting at, the makers of the Bad Batch, whatever the big secret reveal is, hopefully that's going to come sooner rather than later. And as far as her jeopardy goes also, now that we have Fennec Shand involved in this, and Fennec is reporting to some unknown person who's hired her, it makes me wonder if it's the Kaminoans who've actually hired her for that. And, that in itself is a whole other bit of drama that they have yet to really fully explore, but they've certainly set the foundation for the idea of the Kaminoans about to be completely ruined from a financial economic perspective if they lose the cloning business that they had been running and living off of for so long. And they're clearly not taking it sitting down, but what that actually means and what they're going to do is a bit of a question. Whether they're going to continue to try to interact with the Empire and create these sort of hybrid squads like they have with Crosshair and the Elite Troopers, or something else entirely. But the Kaminoans, we have not seen the last of them, and their machinations are going to be part of the broader storytelling perspective of the evolution of the Empire, as well as information happening with Omega too. And it does look like the Bad Batch is going to be on the run for a while. I had said in a previous episode when we had teasers and trailers and whatnot that a lot of the footage from the Bad Batch that they were showing to us prior to its premiere were planetary arrivals, right? Here's the ship coming out of hyperspace in front of this planet, and then in front of another planet, and then in front of another planet. And so it seemed like, we're really going to be just, kind of planet hopping with them for a while and see what happens. But, the whole thing about the Bad Batch having to learn to find their way in this galaxy means to me at least that they're going to have to settle down to some degree. And so does that mean that they're going to hook up with Saw and the Partisans for a while? Or are they going to hook up with Rex and do stuff with him? And maybe that's how Gregor and Wolf are going to be rescued, leading into their appearance in Rebels many years later. That obviously is still an open question as well. But it seems to me that the next 3 quarters of Bad Batch Season 1 have to establish something regarding a routine for them at some point. And it just remains to be seen who they're going to be hooking up with and how they're going to try to do that. And are they going to take up the battle against the Empire, or are they just going to become mercenaries keeping under their radar and leaving it at that? I don't know. I feel like chances are they're destined for something more, but I guess we will see. And I'd love to hear what you think about this first quarter of Season 1 of The Bad Batch. So chime in at Facebook or YouTube or on Twitter at SW7X7 Podcast, or even at home base for the show at SW7X7.com, and let's chat about it. And that is going to do it for this episode of the show. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.